Hello Dark Case family, welcome home. If you didn't know yet, I'm releasing daily videos up until the end of the year, so make sure you subscribe and ding the bell so you don't miss anything. We have a live chat whilst the video premieres too, so this is a good chance for you to really embrace the amazing community that we have built here together. You can support me on Patreon, which is linked below, but there's really no pressure. However, if your name is on screen right now, then you really are a legend. I bring you true crime, disturbing stories, and other things that you may later regret knowing. Let's get straight into today's Dark Case. Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Tami Oldham Ashcraft was only 23 years old when she set out on a journey of a lifetime in September of 1983. Brought up in San Diego, where she'd spent all of her life, she was no stranger to the Pacific Ocean. After all, her childhood had been set against its backdrop. The noise of waves crashing on the beach would accompany her on the long walks that she liked to take there. When she met her fiancé, Richard Sharp, Tami was excited to meet someone who loved the ocean as much as she did. She didn't realise that meeting him would be life-changing, but in a way that she'd never have been able to predict. Tami met Richard in South Africa where they were both working. She'd gone for a summer job but instead came back cautiously hopeful that she'd instead found the person that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Richard, who had been thrown out of the Royal Navy Academy in the UK, loved sailing and loved the ocean just as much as Tami did. The two of them bonded over their shared passion, excitedly swapping plans and hopes for what their future could likely be together, both on and off the water. In a move that sounds insanely romantic, Richard built a yacht and then asked Tami if she wanted to sail it with him to Tahiti in French Polynesia. Tami couldn't believe that this was how her life actually was. Naturally, she agreed, and together the two of them navigated the waters. They passed the Maldives, the Christmas Islands, and Australia. These were all places that Tami had only ever read about, given of course that her home was all the way over on the other side of the world. When they arrived in Tahiti, Richard asked Tami a second question on a white sandy beach, overlooking a lagoon where the water was so clear it was practically transparent. The question was, "Will you marry me?" Tami let out a scream. Sobbing, she said yes. She didn't know exactly where their future would take them both, but she did know that it didn't really matter as long as they could be together. Just as they were debating what to do next after Tahiti, a British couple approached them. They'd heard that the two of them were proficient sailors, and so they wondered if they could hire them to take their own yacht, a boat called Hazana, to San Diego, the very same city that Tami called home. Tami and Richard couldn't believe it. It felt like a sign. This job would mean that they could head to Tami's home together and announce their engagement. The crossing would take around 31 days, and it sounded like paradise. 31 whole days to spend just the two of them together alone, being able to celebrate and plan the next stage of their lives together. Neither of them could have known just how wrong they were. The first 2 weeks passed in blissful peace. The winds were manageable, and together they were able to navigate the waters successfully. Then, just as the two of them were settling into the rhythms of being at sea, and wistfully knowing that the end was nearly in sight, the wind started to change. They were just north of the equator by this point, closer to San Diego now than the tropical paradise that they just left. A westerly storm began to blow around them. On their crackly radio, they heard some horrifying news. A hurricane was coming through. It was picking up more and more speed, whipping the waters into a frenzy around the yacht. Tami and Richard knew that there was nowhere they could go, nowhere that they could turn to get out of this hurricane's way. They were going to be directly in its line of destruction. The couple looked at each other, scared, but hoping that together they could get through anything. They reminded themselves that their love was stronger than any storm, or at least they hoped. Then Hurricane Raymond caught their yacht right in the eye of the storm. The waves at 40 feet towered above them, crashing down with an intensity that Tami and Richard had never seen before. The yacht rocked dangerously from side to side. Tossed by the sheer power of the storm, the wind picked up to 145 miles an hour, sounding like jet engines thrown in reverse. Tami and Richard held hands, fully realizing they were at the complete mercy of the weather. They had no idea when this would pass and when they'd be safe once again. Just hours before, they never wanted this dream journey to end, but now both of them started dreaming about finally arriving in San Diego, dreaming of the happy life that awaited them on the other side. Tami only pictured that life being with Richard. The waves kept getting higher and higher. The couple scrambled to batten down the hatches and to move what they could off the deck. Loose objects started to fly from the force of the wind. They pulled down the sails before they capsized the vessel, and now they had to navigate the waters with just the yacht's engine. The sea was so unbelievably strong that they'd momentarily become airborne, before crashing down violently with a shudder so strong that they both feared it would cause the boat to break. Tami and Richard looked uncertainly at each other. Richard was in the cockpit with a safety harness and tether, and they both hoped that they could just get through the worst of it. But then the waves would come from a different direction and break down over them. Tami and Richard were left wondering all over again if they really could make it through. "Go below deck," Richard yelled, and there was no time to argue. Tami scrambled as fast as she could, slipping as she opened the hatches, and she threw herself inside. She then attached her own safety harness, and as she did this, she heard Richard screaming, "Oh my God." Right at that exact moment, Tami felt the boat drop out from underneath her, and then after that, nothing. The force of the waves had capsized the boat, causing Tami to fall and hit her head upon landing. Red was now leaking from her head, and she lay unconscious. The head injury was so severe that she would see out the rest of the storm without even knowing it. And then Tami awoke almost 30 hours later. Groggily, she slowly came to. The water surrounding her was now eerily calm. Only the wreckage strewn around her served as a reminder of the storm. She tried to move, the effort making her head spin. "Richard," she called. She couldn't hear his voice calling back. Tami somehow stood, taking in her new surroundings. The yacht looked completely different. The mast was in pieces, shattered from the force of the sea, and the sail was now shredded. "Richard," she called again, and that's when she noticed Richard's tether was still cleated onto the deck, but the D-ring, the clip that had been on Richard's safety harness, was missing. This was the clip that had attached Richard to the Hosanna. Tami realized with horror that this meant that Richard was missing too. She looked out over the open sea, and there was nothing on the horizon. In every direction was water and nothing else. She had never felt more alone. Tami had no idea where the storm had pushed the boat, no idea where Richard was, and no idea if she would ever make it back to dry land again. Holding back tears, Tami continued to assess the damage. The cabin downstairs was completely flooded. Her head continued to leak red, and she had nothing that she could find to staunch it with. Tami didn't know what was next, but she did believe one thing. She would survive, and she would survive for both of them. Exhausted and emotionally drained, she found their shortwave radio, the VHF, and sent out her first message. "Mayday, Mayday." But because it was shortwave, someone would have to be in the area to pick up on the call. Their long-distance radio had died just before the storm. She was now down to this one method of communication. The radio crackled, but nothing came back. Tami decided to keep trying every 15 minutes. In the meantime, she started to pump water out of the cabin. The effort made her dizzy. All she could think about was Richard and where he was now. A bleak thing to consider. Weak and injured, she fashioned a makeshift sail from one of the broken poles, along with pieces of ripped canvas she found on the deck. She scrambled to find something that she could navigate with, and she found a sextant. This is a device that can be used to determine the angle between the horizon and the sun. She knew that this way she could find the latitude. To get longitude, she'd need a watch, but she couldn't find it anywhere on the boat, so instead she relied purely on the sextant, navigating up 19 degrees and hoping that she could find her way to Hawaii. It was still 1,500 miles away, an almost impossible prospect. 7 days passed. Tami's head was full of thoughts of Richard, of their life together that now seemed lost. Although she knew it was unlikely she'd ever see him again, she kept hoping for a miracle. The sailing was difficult. Tami couldn't be entirely sure where she was. All she really had to help her were the memories of what Richard had taught her. She could only keep trying to follow the signs of the sun, praying it would lead her to land. Incredibly, some food had survived below deck. She alternated between peanut butter and tinned fruit, trying to vary the timings and the amount so that she'd have something to do. Some minor enjoyment in an otherwise hopeless environment. The days all began to run into each other. This meant that Tami had a lot of time to think about her engagement, how excited she'd been at the proposal, how magical her entire time with Richard had been, all the dreams they'd had. In between tears, Tami would keep trying to get the water out of the hold, using a bucket that luckily hadn't been broken to laboriously scoop out the water. Doing this, she miraculously found her watch right at the bottom of the bilge. Knowing the time meant that Tami could now also navigate the longitude, making her passage much more accurate and potentially much faster. Getting to Hawaii started to feel a little more certain. She could do this. Using longitude also meant that she could get into the North Equatorial Current, nicknamed the Equator Freight Train for how quickly boats can travel once they're in it. Finally, Tami felt like her luck was starting to turn. Being in the current meant she could feel her journey getting more hopeful, now relatively speeding to her destination. The size of the sail she'd managed to make only allowed her to go very slowly otherwise. This current could be a lifesaver. To keep sane, Tami journaled in the ship's log to make sense of her days adrift, and at night she'd go to sleep with Richard's shirt wrapped around her, and even though it was damp, it still held the smell of her fiancé. She talked to Richard, imagining him encouraging her to keep on trying, to fight on for the both of them, even though Tami knew deep down that only the ocean heard her whispers. Even though her luck seemed to be turning, she wasn't completely in the clear yet. The VHF radio died, meaning she was now completely adrift at sea, and without any form of communication. She could now no longer send out any SOS calls. Tami realized just how alone she was. After being lost at sea for 41 days, Tami woke up in the morning and gazed out to the horizon, and this time she saw something she thought she may never see again. Finally, she could see land. Or at least Tami hoped that she could believe her eyes. She wasn't sure if it really was Hawaii or maybe just some clouds. The sky became overcast and Tami could no longer tell. She blinked back tears, not yet allowing herself to relax. She wanted so badly to feel the solid, motionless land underneath her again. She tried to look again at the horizon, but could no longer see anything. Tami was left wondering if her weeks alone at sea meant that her mind had started to play tricks on her. Discouraged, she lay down and went to sleep. She could only hope that things may look different in the morning. This night would turn out to be one of the last that Tami would spend on the yacht. Just 3 days later, she would finally arrive in Hawaii. The knowledge passed on to her from Richard had guided her to safety. She had been going in the right direction. Tami stepped onto the firmness of Hawaii and vowed to make the most of the life that she had left. But now she felt Richard's absence even more. They were going to announce their engagement, but instead she had to announce his death. But Tami also knew that Richard would be proud of her, that he'd want her to celebrate surviving, even when the odds were so stacked against her. Later, she'd buy a sextant to hang around her neck, a constant reminder that all it can take is one storm for things to be changed forever. She uses her necklace as a reminder to live in the present, a present where even though she didn't have Richard, she still had her memories of him, and she still had her life.